Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Sunday, January 19th, 2025, and today's topic will be, I'm going to call it the 80-20 rule for art. Well, how do I want to say this? Well, it's kind of a methodology I'm coming up with. The title may change, but basically that's the focus for today. But before we begin, welcome back if you are returning, and welcome if you're new. I sketch and post every day, and I set timers. I've moved to 10-minute timers, basically. It used to be 5 minutes, but I usually have a lot of information, so I'm going to start a 10-minute timer. I will also post a link in the description for the video called Auto Drawing, which was on the 13th. And there's more details in that video, but basically I've been talking about this idea of drawing from imagination and having it be 80%. I'm just using that as a rule of thumb. Basically, I drew this from imagination is the point, and if you want to see how I did it, you can check out that video. And as I work on the sketch today, I'll just kind of keep talking about what I mean by that, like the 80-20 rule thing and sort of why I do it and stuff. I don't always do it, but it's just kind of a good like rule of thumb. And so what I've done is created a border, and for this page I'm going to kind of make it sequential art basically, and that's basically what's going to turn it into a comic. Now if there was text in here, it would begin to look like a comic, or it could also be like an illustration for something like a story. But for right now, we're just going to do this much. And yeah, I'll just kind of talk about. So basically, if this is 80% of it, of the panel or the illustration or the sketch, then for the 20%, I just looked up like pictures of cottages. And what I like about this is that, well, obviously you have to do studies, which would be, you could still use kind of that rule, which is you could look up a picture and do a sketch, which is what a sketchbook is good for. And so just kind of copy, reference, but then the 20% would be figuring out like the style of it, for example. So as I begin to sketch, so yeah, basically I just drew this from imagination, and then now I can just look at a picture of a cottage or just browse and just see some ideas. So for example, I might see ideas for like right here. And then also as I do this, so keep in mind that this is a style. Like there's no, well, one, I'm not wanting to be photorealistic. And the other is that I want to be able to just sketch and draw and also come up with stuff for like a comic if I want. And so I have videos where I talk about how to draw like basic shapes and line work and stuff like that. So kind of like what I'm doing right now, so I'm just going to keep it at this zoom level so one thing is to get comfortable to sketch. So this is like okay for me to record while I'm sketching. So part of this is an experiment, and part of it is a methodology and just seeing, like practicing and seeing. So you'll notice that as I'm doing this, I'm not too worried about like, I'm thinking about the line work, but I'm not too worried about it. I'm not trying to say that this is like the final panel or the final comic page, and that kind of goes into that 80-20 rule thing, which I'm going to keep bringing up and focusing on. And what I mean by that is if 80% of it was basically, I did the layout. So if 80% of it was just from imagination, and then the 20% is me looking at like a photo, for example, which makes it easy because then I don't have to worry about finding a photo like to draw from, which isn't ideal, honestly, unless you're just doing studies. So you could be doing a study about style or study about like how something you can draw it, or you could be doing a study about materials, like that kind of thing. So nothing wrong with any of that. But I feel like if you're going to do something like original, such as your own work, it could be a comic or it could be anything, it could be just a picture that you're coming up with, then yeah, like you want to be able to draw. But yeah, that's kind of like another topic. But going back to this, the idea is that, so doing the sketch was 80% of it. Now just kind of finding something that looks interesting and giving like ideas is the like that's the 20%. So now what I'm doing is combining that, and so I'm just going to get this particular picture, this sketch or drawing, and basically do 80% of it in this as I sit down and record this video. And so that'll be like 80% of this particular picture. So part of this has to do with, again, a methodology, just having a process. It really helps, honestly. And so because I've started this channel, like ever since I started it, it's helped me to be more methodical since I do this every day. And by having a method, it helps me to begin work and get work done. So like whatever reference I'm using, all I'm really doing is just adding. So this would be kind of like the base model, and I'm just kind of adding like the detail or like the texture on top of it. Now there's different ways to go about it. What happens is I notice that some people say, well, or struggle with or something about the idea of drawing, basically. So they'll say, well, how do I get the perspective? Well, that's what learning perspective is. And yes, you can always use something to do like the shortcut, but you're always going to need that. Same with using reference. You're always going to need reference to come up with your ideas or to draw something. And I'm just kind of like, I don't want to do that. If I'm going to use reference to just sketch, then that's what I'll do. But I'm not going to use reference to say like I drew something. This is actually the easier way to do it, but it may not seem that way, but it actually ultimately is the easier way, which is to say just learning how to draw is the easiest thing. Because a lot of questions that I see just from browsing just comes from that. It's this idea of, I mean, I guess it depends on what you want to do. I feel like what I want to do is kind of specific, but not really. So you can see I'm just using the stuff I had already sketched. So in other words, 80% of it is already done. Like the layout's already here. So it's as if I'm passing it on to someone else to fill in the detail, but like use the layout. I don't have to think about that. It's already done. If you're not sure how to draw in perspective, then that's a good thing to practice. That's a good thing to kind of figure out. Like this was made up perspective. I just kind of, so that's kind of what I mean about like what I'm doing is kind of specific in the sense that I don't draw perspective to build. It's not architecture. It's for a comic or an illustration or for like concept art for my story. So I might have an idea of a scene or like a setting in the story, and it's nice to be able to sketch it out. And then like, I mean, if you can do it, it's just something that I'm interested in and that I can do. And so that's really my way of getting into the story, because stories can be pretty complex if you're wanting to tell a very detailed and kind of epic story. So this is just from pretty much easily looking up reference and just using basic sketching techniques. The other thing I did want to point out was I'm making it on purpose, not like cross-hatching as much as I can do. Like I sometimes do that sort of automatically kind of thing. But one, my idea is to, so this is in my sketchbook, but I can also do comic pages, like maybe on printer paper, for example, and then I'll scan it in, and I might want to add color, or it could be black and white, and then I can add like the words and stuff on the computer, which to me, that's fine. I have no issue with that because I would want the comic to be published. It would have to be digitized anyway. So some of this, why I'm even doing it this way, is just from past experience, because I might have gotten a description to do something kind of like this. And then I would just do it, but like not necessarily have like a methodology, or I would take shortcuts to get it done, but like not really learn like how to do it. And that's kind of how I know like I didn't actually learn how it worked. The other thing is, yeah, without like a methodology, it's always going to be kind of a struggle. So at this point, like I'm just going to keep it pretty loose like this, and then if I really wanted to turn this thing into like a finished thing, which there's no reason to because it's in my sketchbook, so I don't need it to look like the final product. But if 80% of the pictures is in here, then it makes the rest of it pretty easy. Again, part of this is like an experiment just to see if it would even work. And it does. It actually does work. It makes it enjoyable. Part of this is, yeah, just wanting to share like a way of doing it. I mean, it involves knowing how to draw. I don't think there's like there's not going to be like I mean, there's shortcuts involved doing it this way too, but like it's not meant to be like instant gratification, because if it is instant gratification, then there's no, then it's not going to be interesting. I mean, like, who cares? Like, that's the thing. I mean, I guess some people do care. I don't know, like, or are okay with that. I just feel like I'm talking to people that would be interested in this kind of thing. So in some ways, I am making it, one, easier for myself, and kind of sharing how you could also make it easier, but like you still have to work at it, and you still have to have an idea. Sort of suggesting, like, there's areas like this that are kind of open. I can suggest some light. I don't have to outline everything. You can be a little bit more careful. You could draw it out in pencil. It's still the same process. It's what I'm being pretty loose with this, so that's why I'm not worried about drawing it out in pencil, because it sort of forces me to be loose. Like if I had drawn this out in pencil, for example, and I go into like I'm going to want to feel like doing a, not being as loose about it. Or if I do lay it out in pencil, I would be very loose with the pencil, because there's no reason to repeat the steps. Like if that makes sense. So for example, there's areas that I kind of intuitively want to like start adding like shadow or shading to it, and I just I make it a point not to do that, because of the fact that if it's for comics, for example, and also that might not be the look I'm going for. I actually wasn't that sure what this video was going to be for today, but part of it is this is actually the latest page, and then I have about, I mean, they last for a little while. I have about that much left in the sketchbook, and I've shown some like that mini comic that I worked on, and it's in the sketchbook, and I would say like that was kind of overkill for like the sketchbook, but like I haven't really drawn comics in a long time, and I just wanted to see, so it was kind of a experiment. So you can see that I can be pretty loose about it, because it's like the information is already here, like the sketch is here, like 80% of it, and so yeah, I can be pretty loose. Part of this is also I'm gonna experiment with coloring this. I can clean up a lot of this, and since if it is digital, I can make straight lines pretty easily, and also I want to have space for coloring. But you just got to be methodical and take it a step at a time, and really learn. So even though I'm going to add some texture, I'm going to leave it kind of open, just so that if I color it, you can actually see some of the color. And you can kind of get away with a lot. Like, it doesn't have to be architecturally perfect. You're not gonna to build it. And again, I may end up changing the design of it. Like, the main thing with my channel is the daily sketching. However, it's not just for that, and I'm not using it as an excuse, and I've said this before, to do like my project, as it were, although it could be used for my project. But really, it's about what would be valuable for like making a video about. It's kind of its own thing. Like it's separate in a way, but it's about art. But like, if I'm gonna work on the comic or like something that I have going on, I'm going to just do that, like, you know, not just in these videos is what I mean. So the perspective isn't perfect. Like, definitely if it's really off, then yeah, like you want to figure that out before you start to add detail. The other thing is to approach it like as its own thing. So you're not trying to, or I'm not trying to make the perspective or like this picture be perfect for like every picture. It needs to look good for this idea, for this particular illustration or panel or idea, yeah. But one thing I do like about, since I've started making these videos, is it's helped me because of the coming up with like a methodology. But also what I really love about art in general, or visual art in general, is that or specifically is that you can just see, like, at the end of the day, like, that's the main thing. It's either gonna look interesting or good or not. Like, it's instant kind of feedback. Like, you can see it. If it's interesting, it'll be interesting. If it's not, it's not. And yeah. So yeah, I'm just making it a point not to shade everything in. So there's a lot of stuff I've already gone over in other videos, just in this one panel. Stuff about composition, about perspective and stuff. And I do have other videos about perspective. And also the video I'm going to link to for this one sort of shows you. So for example, here, going back to this idea of like the line art part of it, is I may not detail everything here either. I might just do like the kind of the outline of it. This is more of a stylistic thing, which I'm still wanting to experiment with. So you can see that in a way I did like 80% of this panel right here, because some of this, I mean, I'll probably look up some foliage or something like that. But even if I didn't, like, it depends. Like, some of it is, the outline is pretty good. So I like to practice or study stuff like this. And this is pretty meditative. I mean, you're just drawing tree branches. But yeah, like if I'm browsing, like I'll have reference and stuff like that, but I'm not having to look at reference. Like, that's the thing. But if I feel inspired, I'll do sketches. But then when I'm actually working on like my comic or something, so some of this line work is okay. But like, let's say I was going to ink this, I wouldn't necessarily go too detailed with the line work, because then I'd have to go over it again. So that's why I wouldn't do that. Because I'd have to just redraw these little like cross-hatching things. I would just leave it open so that it's sketchy enough so that I can draw it better if I need to. So yeah, I'm gonna wrap this up. I know I talked about different things, but yeah, before I sign off, I want to thank you for joining me for today's sketching routine. Hopefully you come back. If you like these videos, please support the channel. I appreciate it. And until next time, keep on sketching.